Hello and welcome all back to Election Time News America. Today is Tuesday, August 5th, 2025. We're going to be looking at the gubernatorial elections again for 2025, looking over at some changes in the race because they've been changing a bit. And so that's going to be the main focus. We're going to be looking at things in national context as well as polling odds and more. Election Time News, your one stop for all things elections and politics, from summations to poll reviews and news. Subscribe below for more content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. Also, make sure to follow the Substack, Threads, Instagram, and X so that you will always stay up to date on political news. Remember, there's never a dull moment in politics. So, looking first off at the overall map, we have two races that are up. You can see the same thing in 2021. This is actually a recall election that Gavin Newsom beat by 23.7 points. That's not happening again this year. We have Virginia and we have New Jersey. Both of them are term limited. Virginia has no term limits, but instead prohibits any candidate from being governor for consecutive terms. And New Jersey has a limit of 2 consecutive terms, which Chris Murphy has reached. Youngkin already had a term, so obviously he is now term limited. So, to start things off in New Jersey and obviously in Virginia, what we're looking at here is there's in theory, a three-way race in Virginia, but the main two candidates are, of course, Winsome Earle-Sears, who is currently the lieutenant governor, and Abigail Spanberger, a former U.S. House representative, who is very strong in her own right. And then we do have the New Jersey gubernatorial election where we have Mikie Sherrill, who is a U.S. House representative, and Jack Citarelli, who actually was the nominee in 2021. So look at these races currently. We do have Sherrill did win a relatively competitive Democratic primary. It was a relatively tough cycle, but we did end up with Mikie Sherrill ended up winning with 34% of the vote. She actually got more of the outside vote, a bit more of the urban regions went for other candidates. But this may actually end up being able to help her get more of the rural vote, though she may suffer a bit in the deep urban vote, which may end up hurting because the Democrats actually did struggle with that in 2024 in general, but it might end up not actually being that big of a deal. And the Republican primary was a sweep by Jack Citarelli. He won every single county in the entire state, winning over 2/3 of the vote. He had the endorsement from Donald Trump, so there wasn't much of a shot that he'd lose. He also was the candidate back in 2021 when he only narrowly lost to Phil Murphy by 3 points, 3.22%. And so that's going to be a relatively interesting case here is that he actually Murphy was leading a lot of polls by double digits, but he actually ended up only defeating Citarelli by 3.22%. And this is actually the first time that the party who won the gubernatorial election in New Jersey was the same as the incumbent, as the U.S. president since 1985. So this is definitely an interesting race, and so that could end up being the same this year in 2025. For Virginia, though, it's seeming to be a bit less eventful, and so as of right now, the polling is relatively strong, showing a strong lead for Spanberger, 7.5 points on RCP. And the recent ones from VCU have her up by 12, and one from Roanoke College by 17. So obviously she's been on the way up. Roanoke College's last one had her up by 15, so that's a shift of 2. They're a relatively left-leaning pollster. So, but then also you see VCU went from 10 to 12, which means that she is slowly gaining. But then if we look at New Jersey, Sherrill goes from up by 21 by Rutgers Eagleton. Then Fairleigh Dickinson only has her up by 8. However, this is an RCP. There's relatively few cases there. So to really get into the polling right now, we then look at the page on Wikipedia, which doesn't show all of them, but quite a bit more than some of the ones in they misorganized it on Virginia's. But right now we do have Sherrill up ahead by 6 in the most recent one by StimSite Research. 3.3% margin of error, 3.4, 3.5, so relatively low outside of the margin of error for all of these results. But she has been slowly slipping. As you can see from some earlier ones. This was, I believe, yep, leans, so pure undecideds. But here she was ahead by 20, and now you're looking at more of the recent ones that were in mid-late July. You're looking more at a 6-point lead. So if anything, it's actually slowly dropping. And so that's going to really end up making this race a bit more competitive. Plus, looking at the fact that how Murphy did way worse than was expected for the polling. Look at the polling here for the aggregate polls on RCP. Murphy was winning by 7.8, which is in fact the exact same margin right now that Spanberger's winning by, relatively close. But there's no weighted result for Sherrill because there's literally only 2 results. But generally, the direction of the country is doing relatively poor. That can generally hurt the incumbent party. But that doesn't matter too much. That might end up being why Youngkin ended up losing. If we look at the direction of the country right now in 2021, it was at minus 11.4. So it's a little bit worse than it was around a year ago. Not by much, but a little bit worse, within the margin of error and difference, though. So that could end up shifting things in the Democrats' direction, but it's not necessarily expected to be that poor of a state anyway, as the PVI is 3.9 for the state of Virginia. But again, if you look at Murphy 7.8, right now we're looking at not that much stronger of a result for Sherrill. So that may end up actually meaning that the result's going to be a lot closer in New Jersey. But as of right now, we need more polling data. So it's only going to be an 8.3 point margin, which, based on the overall numbers there, is going to be not that poor. So that's the first off. And in Virginia, it's going to be somewhere around that margin most likely. But Virginia is actually more likely to go blue than New Jersey. Both of them are right around 90%, though. So that is relatively close. It's a bit more bullish for Democrats than either of my numbers are. But and this is just based off of an algorithm that just does it based off of the result guess. But Virginia, 94% chance of victory according to Kalshi. And so that's definitely a strong result right now, looking at the number on Kalshi. It's been sitting quite high for a while, and it was never anywhere less than 75% for Spanberger. So Earle-Sears has been on the downside of this for basically the entire time. If we look at the predictions, every single rank has it a flip. Inside Elections has tilt. Salvador's Crystal Ball and the Cook Political Report has it lean. Race to the White House, which is a bit bullish for Democrats, has it likely. But this is as of May 1st, so that is relatively old. April. These are both April. This is as of June 30th. So none of them are as of very accurate or very recent. But maybe they just haven't updated it on their actual host sites relatively recently. But either way, Virginia is looking relatively strong for the Democrats, and this is actually probably basically a safe pickup. The more interesting race, with almost 4 times as much spent as well, is New Jersey, where Sherrill was leading very, very well right in the early April to early May area, but then she had a dip. But still, she basically hasn't had any point where it's been below 80% since before April. Right now, she's sitting at 88%. She did drop a little bit. Yesterday, there was another high of 90% on the 4th. Yesterday, there was a high of 90%. Now she's down to 88. Jack Citarelli is at 11. So it's still relatively high. But as of right now, it's still not, entirely implausible here. Just over 2/3 chance of victory, based on that in and of itself, is going to be a relatively strong showing, obviously, for the Democrats, especially considering they're going to be gaining on their margins in both states, which I guess would also be expected considering the fact that the incumbent president is a Republican. If you see what happened last time that Trump was in office, Murphy flipped the seat blue after Chris Christie was term limited, and Democrats held on in the governorship by 9 points in Virginia. So if we're looking at something roughly equivalent to that, shifting the margins towards where it was in 2017 was 55-44. So that would be a 5 point. That would be a solid 5 point shift to the left. Actually, no, another 5-point shift. That would end up being 55-45, and you would end up with an 8-point lead in Virginia and 13 in New Jersey. So that's already more than we're looking at this moment, and actually flipped for the margins, if anything. 13-point win in Virginia, 8 points in New Jersey. But either way, Democrats aren't expected to do relatively poor by any means in these elections, so that's going to be the main issue for for Republicans, is that they're most likely just going to be losing their seat in Virginia. So that's going to be most likely by an 8.3-point margin in New Jersey. This is going to be there we go. No, it actually is the 5-point. This is going to be a probable margin here. 5 to 8 points is it's going to be just over. That's actually going to be likely margin, just barely though. And so that's just going to be just underneath safe. And the same thing for New Jersey. New Jersey is going to be 8.3. Virginia is going to be just under safe. At 11 points. That's going to be a strong likely margin. Could be creeping towards safe as things continue, but we're starting to see continuing to see more strength. If we look at Virginia again, it's actually increasing recently. It went from the last month. It's gone from 87 to 94% chance of victory there. And then, of course, if you look at the margin of victory here a month ago, it was 87. Now it's at 94. But then New Jersey, it's slowly slipping. We could potentially see that actually getting a bit lower over the rest of time, but still an 8.3-point margin as of right now. And so then we're going to be looking at the county map, which is going to be somewhat similar to how things looked in 2020 for Biden, interestingly enough, just based on those. There's going to be a bit of movement, obviously, as there's some trends here. But I mean, so for some of these counties, obviously they moved towards Kamala Harris. Buckingham's obviously moving away a lot more than the state as a whole. If we're able to edit this, used to be able to, but we get edit this and then shift it to the right by edit and then shift it by the national popular vote margin, then that's not what I wanted. All right, well, because it's done by vote share. All right, well, that sucks. So we're not going to be able to easily do that. But what I was going to say was that some of these counties obviously have moved a bit more or different than other ones. But for the most part, this is going to be somewhat similar to 2020 in some manners. And so, in 2020. In a lot of ways, but there's going to be some counties that continue to move, and there's going to be some, considering it's going to be a likely 11-point margin, it's going to be a little bit to the left of Biden's win in 2020. So there's going to be a bit more blue, a bit deeper blues on the map than was in 2020, and so just flipping back and forth here, you can see there's some movement, like not away. That's going to be that's slightly a left trending county. It did move by 7.5, but the state as a whole moved by about 4.5. So it's actually a bit right trending. But some of these outer regions here, these ones moved less than the state as a whole. This was really what drove the entire state, was the Northern Virginia region. Some of these moved to the left, but that's really going to be about it. And so then we're going to be moving over to New Jersey, where this is a very blue map compared to what we're looking at on the county map. We're losing some southern counties over here, but still doing definitely better than Chris Murphy did. As you can see, he lost all 3 down here, these 2 as well, where most likely Sherrill will be able to flip 1, narrowly hold on to Passaic. As you can see on the map here, Donald Trump won it by 3 percentage points in 2024. That was just mainly due to low turnout. If you look at 95,000 to 129,000, Trump got 92,000 and then 100,000. That's only gaining 8,000 votes, but Harris did lose over 30,000. So that's really going to be where that county was lost, get more turnout in that area. This is going to be where Sherrill is going to be able to perform relatively well based on what we've seen in the primary. But she's likely going to be able to get some more turnout back. They were able to get in from losing from 2024, but it's going to be somewhat similar to this because it's going to be likely a similar margin. Kamala Harris won by 5.9 percentage points, and right now the projection is actually 8.3, so it's going to be a few points to the left of where it was in 2024, but nothing insane. Probably a bit more movement. Gloucester is most likely going to be able to flip because that's going to be an urban area right there. Same thing with Passaic. And that's going to be what's going to be driving most of the state to the left there. Atlantic as well. Um, but Morris did go red by quite a bit in 2021, and it's generally a bit of a left trending county. It didn't move as much as the rest of the state did. The rest of the state moved by 10. It only moved by 7. Some of these other ones were actually a lot redder. Passaic moved the most by 19.4, and then it was Hudson. But it's safe red, and there's actually generally this one is actually going to be relatively interesting. It's going to be a swing county, most likely. It's probably going to end up being a bit blue, but that's going to be an interesting one to watch considering how far to the right it's trended. Morris is actually generally a bit of a left trending county. All of these are actually left trending counties because of how they voted in respect to the rest of the state. The rest of the state moved 10 points. So everything that moved to the right less than 10 points actually is a left trending county. And so with that, then we can see that obviously Democrats are generally favored to win both elections, but actually more so Virginia than New Jersey, which is almost the exact opposite of what we saw 4 years ago in 2021, where Virginia ended up flipping in what some saw as an upset, and New Jersey narrowly held on, breaking expectations, going with the same party as was in the White House at the time. But they did manage to secure that election, which means that most likely at the end of this cycle, it will end up being 26 for Republicans, 24 for Democrats with this flip in Virginia. And with the odds that we have here going on a 5-scale probability, we would then have New Jersey with a 68% chance of victory for the Democrats, would drop down to be lean, albeit narrowly, but it still would. And so we would end up having one probable race in Virginia going towards likely. Actually, no, they both drop more. This would be lean, 60 to 70%, and this would be probable going towards likely. And as we near election day, things will get more and more clear, and we'll be able to be a bit more certain on these calls. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe down below if you are not already. Share the video. And thank you all so much again, and have a fantastic rest of your day.